Welcome to this episode of Interpreters and Translators on Air. Today we have with us Catharine Cellier-Smart from Reunion Island. Catharine, if you please introduce yourself briefly, go ahead.
Hello, as Al said, I'm Catharine and I'm a freelance French to English translator. I'm originally from the UK and I now live on an island called Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean.
Hi, Catharine. Welcome.
Catharine.
Hi.
Great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Esther, please go ahead.
Okay, just a short introduction on my end. My name is Esther Navarro Hall. I am originally from Mexico. I reside in California now. I am a freelance conference interpreter, and I also do court interpreting, medical interpreting, and I'm an adjunct professor at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And Gerda, please go ahead.
Thank you, Al. Hello, everybody. My name is Gerda Prato Espejo. I'm originally from Venezuela, and I live in New Jersey, United States, and I am a court interpreter. Happy to be here. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerda.
Thanks, Gerda.
And today we are here with Catharine Cellier-Smart, who will share her journey with us, both her professional journey as a translator, and hopefully we'll learn a few things about her personal journey, not only from the UK to Reunion Island, but as you will all see, to many places around the globe. I'll introduce myself very briefly. I'm Al Navas. I'm a freelance interpreter in Missouri in the USA. Catharine, we were extremely interested in hearing your story. When I first saw where you lived, and I saw you through Google+, in fact, I was extremely interested because of where you are. We have called your journey Adventures on a Faraway Island. It is a faraway island, but everything in today's world is so close, and so it was extremely intriguing. And as we have visited with you in the last few weeks and learned more about you, it has become really, really an important part, something that I have been looking forward to, and that I know that Esther and Gerda join me also in looking forward to it.
Yes.
And what I would like to do, as you share with us your journey, I will also be showing photographs that you were kind to send us, and I will share them through screen share so that everyone can get an idea not only where you are, but also your environment and the wonderful area where you are. So what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to you and listen to your story. Please go ahead, Catharine.
Okay, thank you, Al, Gerda, and Esther. Before I talk a little bit about my journey and how I ended up on Reunion Island, I'll maybe tell you a little bit about the island itself. It's a French overseas department in the Indian Ocean. So as you can see on the map, it's situated east of Madagascar, about 700 kilometers east of Madagascar. To the north, about 1,800 kilometers, there are the Seychelles. 6,000 kilometers to the east is Australia, and then 6,000 kilometers to the south is Antarctica, and that's it. Mauritius is the nearest neighbor. It's about 200 kilometers away. And size-wise, it's about the same size as Luxembourg or the American state of Rhode Island. It's about an 11-hour flight to Paris to get to Reunion. And it's an island with no indigenous population. People came from France and from Madagascar in the 17th century and settled the island. and they were actually dropped off on the island as a punishment. And as the boat sort of came by a couple of years later, and was expecting to find probably a couple of skeletons on the beach, and found that the people were thriving and living very well. So a whole culture built up. Slaves were brought from Madagascar, from East Africa. Initially, coffee was grown. That didn't work out too well, so sugarcane, which is still an important part of the culture, started being grown. The island was actually British for 5 years, but didn't interest the British enough, so it went back to being French. And in 1848, slavery was abolished. So indentured labor was brought over from India and from China. And all this means that there's an incredible ethnic mix on Reunion Island that I've never seen the like of anywhere else. People of Malagasy, Chinese, African, Indian origin, and European origin as well. And in 1946, the island, like some other places, for example, Guadeloupe, Martinique, or French Guiana, became an overseas French department. So that means today that the island uses the euro. It was actually the first place in the world to use the euro. There's the ethnic mix you can see. The island uses the euro. It also has an education, legal, and health system that is virtually identical to that of mainland France, with a few adjustments for specificities, local specificities. As I said, Mauritius is about 200 kilometers away, and there's another small island which some people might have heard of, which is called Rodrigue, and these three islands together form a group of islands called the Mascarene Islands. The highest point is 3,070 meters. You can hike up there. It's called the Piton de Neige. Reunion has one of the most active volcanoes in the world. And on average, I think it erupts about every 14 months or so. It has most of the world's rainfall records, all the way through from the most amount of rain that's fallen in 12 hours right through to 15 days. And you may have seen one of the photos earlier on. It's also subject to cyclones as well. But that's just a part of life for anybody that lives in the tropics. So how did I end up on this island? I grew up in London, and I went to the Midlands of England to university to do a degree in European Studies, a 4-year degree. My third year, I had to spend abroad in France, and I chose to go to Aix-en-Provence. And about 2 months before I was supposed to go to Aix-en-Provence, university lecturers said to me and another student, "We've chosen you to start university exchanges with the University of Reunion." We were rather surprised because normally we got to choose where we went to, and here we were being told that we'd been chosen to go somewhere. I had vaguely heard of Reunion Island before, and anyway, with the other student, we went to the university library. We got out an atlas. We checked where it was and said, "Yeah, it looks great. Let's go." So in September 1990, I arrived on Reunion Island. For me, it was really warm. I saw everybody, wearing jeans and trousers and long-sleeve tops. And of course, what I didn't realize at the time was that this was the end of winter. Everything is relative. Winter is about, 25 degrees here. And I immediately felt at home, even though I had learned French at school. I'd learned French at university, and on the island, people's native language is actually Reunion Creole. French is a second language for most people, but I felt at home, and everybody does speak French. As for anybody that finds themselves in a situation where more or less for the first time, you're really in a situation of immersion. So it was a very steep learning curve. But I think it's something that we've all been through when we really have to start living and learning a language. We were, the other student and myself, we were novelties in some respects. The other students weren't yet used to having students from abroad. This was pre-Erasmus, and so it was good because we were able to make friends, and we were able to speak a lot of French, and there was nobody to speak English with. And so my French really increased in leaps and bounds. And after almost a year, it was time to go back to the UK to finish my degree. And in 1992, I finished my degree. There was a lot of graduate unemployment in the UK at the time. And I thought to myself, what do I want to do? I'm still young. I don't really feel like settling down very much and being serious. I'll go back to reading for a year or two. So I arrived back on Reunion Island. I then spent a period of about 2 years translating. This is when I really started translating. I was doing interpreting work and also teaching, which actually convinced me that I'm not made out to be a teacher. It's not really my vocation. And at the time, this was 1992, 1994, there was already faxes, but there was no internet, there was no email. I couldn't live from translating and interpreting. There wasn't enough work on the island. After a while, I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do with my future. At that point, I had met the man who was to become my husband. So I decided I wanted to stay on the island for a little bit more. And at the same time, I did two things. I applied for teacher training college, despite what I've just said. And I also applied for jobs in the private sector. And luckily for the future of lots of children that I didn't get to teach, I actually ended up getting a job in the private sector. And I spent the next 14 years working in different jobs in the private sector. Initially a lot in import-export with companies that needed somebody who was bilingual, but not only. At the same time, I also carried on doing translation work in the evenings, at the weekends, just through word of mouth. There was always a demand for translation work. In 2005, 2006, I did an MBA at the local business school. That was quite a tough period because, as anybody who's done one while they've been working knows, it's a full day of work and then 3 hours of lectures in the evening and homework. But it was a very good experience. And in 2008, my husband got a job in South Korea. And so we packed up our belongings and all the belongings we didn't need, rented a house out and headed over to South Korea. And our first surprise was the weather in South Korea. I always thought of Asia as being somewhere quite warm, and in fact in Korea, in Seoul, the winters can be -18. So that was a surprise, especially coming from a tropical island. It was my husband's first winters that he had lived through from beginning until end, because my husband was born in mainland France but grew up on the island of Reunion, so he'd never lived through a whole winter. I was not allowed to work when we were living in South Korea. And my husband, as my husband is a teacher. He had a lot of school holidays. So every 6 weeks he had 2 weeks holiday, and over the summer 2 months holiday. And every time he was on holiday, we went traveling. I also went traveling a couple of times when he wasn't on holiday. And over the period of about over the period of 3 years, I made about 30 trips and discovered about 18 new countries, which was a really amazing experience, which I'm very glad to have been able to have had. I tried to learn Korean. Like any linguist, I went to a new country with a desire to try and learn the language and fit in and communicate with people as soon as possible. I found Korean to be, for somebody with a background in European languages, it's a very difficult language. So I had to make a choice. Either I would have had to consecrate all my time to learning Korean to become proficient in it. And in fact, I left my Korean at a stage where it's, I would say, conversational. Not even conversational. It's very basic, which is one of my biggest regrets. And while I was in Korea, I started to use social media. I started to use particularly using Twitter a lot. And after 3 years, it was time to come back to Reunion Island. I was a bit apprehensive, but at the same time, I had time to think about what I wanted to do with my future, and I decided that my future was to do something that I'd always wanted to do, which was to become a full-time translator. So since last year, this is the case for me full-time. It's difficult on the island, I would say. There's a certain number of specificities to the island, so it's rather difficult to specialize. So I have a certain amount of work which is from outside the island, but I also have a certain amount of work which is on the island. And the island being small, you know, if somebody needs a translator, it's rather difficult to say, well, you know, that's not really my speciality. You know, there's nobody else to go and see, really. So I also get called on to be an interpreter. Again, it's difficult for somebody to be a full-time interpreter on the island. So there are a certain number of things that are specific to a year. It's a situation that you wouldn't necessarily have in a larger country and in a larger situation.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, man. What a treat to hear your story, Catharine.
Fantastic.
Yes, we're fascinated by it. It's quite a journey, and just like many of us, I think that a lot of times we don't expect we'll end up working in these fields, whether it's interpreting or translation, and life just happens to take us there, even if it's in a roundabout way. So if you will allow me, I had a couple of questions that I had prepared that I was going to, you know, sort of follow through with, but now that you were talking about the place where you live and how you came about doing the job that you have, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with a language-related question first and see if you can help me with that. I found it very interesting that you said that at first there were no inhabitants whatsoever in the island, on the island, and that one of the languages which you specialize in is French-based Creole. And if you don't mind, maybe explaining to us a little bit, and also for our audience, just in general, what a Creole is and what combination of languages form this specific reunion Creole. I think that would be very interesting.
Okay. Altogether in the world, I think there are about 130 different Creoles, and a lot of them are English-based, but they're also based on other languages such as Portuguese or Spanish, and about 15 Creoles are French-based. So Reunion is one of these French-based Creoles. Other examples of French-based Creole would be the Creole that's spoken in Mauritius, in the Seychelles. Probably the most well-known one is Haitian Creole, but there, as I say, there are a certain number of Creoles. And in fact, a Creole is a language that is created when people with different linguistic backgrounds find themselves in a situation where they need to communicate. So little bits of different languages are taken from everybody's culture in such a way that they end up being able to communicate. And in this particular case, most of the language comes from French, but there are inputs from African languages, from Malagasy, from Chinese, from Indian, and I think the definition is that when children are born and start growing up speaking that language, from that point onwards, it's defined as a, when it starts being children's native language, that's when it's defined as a Creole, as opposed to a Pidgin. And Creoles are languages. They're not dialects. They're not patois or anything. They're definitely languages.
That's right. It's really important to make that difference, particularly for people who aren't very aware of what a language consists of and all that. I understand that most of the population speaks that type of Creole, right? Is that on Reunion Island? That would be the main language. Is that correct?
Exactly, yes. I would say it's about 90% of the population.
Wow.
Anybody that was born and brought up on the island, I would say speaks Creole. Even sometimes people that are not born, just the fact generally of having been to school on the island, people pick it up. When you learn it at a later age like me, it's slightly more difficult, and there's not a classroom situation where you can go and learn Creole as an adult.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You do, by the force of things, you do end up picking it up and speaking it. And I know that in several companies where I worked, I was the only non-native Creolophone.
Wow. It makes for a very unique situation because I understand that, I mean, it's such a small island, relatively speaking. You said more or less the size of Rhode Island, but there's so many nationalities represented there. And then the fact that people live there so harmoniously, from what I understand, I mean, there's a lot of, because that's not usually the case in other places where there's so many influences from so many countries and all that. So that's really fascinating. Thank you very much, Catherine.
That is fascinating, Catherine. I'd like to follow up with two parts of what you and Esther what Esther asked about, and that is it is unusual in many ways that the various ethnic groups get along so well. What is your take on it? Is it the climate? I have visited many areas where it may not be the same case.
That's right.
However, on Reunion, for all of the various ethnic groups to get along so well, is it the climate? Is it the fact that what do you think is the main factor that has resulted in so much harmony?
I think it's the insularity and the isolation. I think insularity can be negative and it can be positive. And in terms of the ethnic mix, people have, stuck together. And as I was mentioning earlier on, for example, there are cyclones that blow through every year. And in this sort of situation, everybody sticks together and helps each other. And everybody's very tolerant of, your neighbor on this side might go to the mosque, and this one goes to the church, and this one goes to the Chinese temple, and that one goes to the Tamil temple. But you know,
Right.
you're living side by side, and you see that they're normal people like yourself, and there's nothing to be. I think a lot of times when people don't get on, it's to do with fear and lack of knowledge. And when you see people, you see that everybody's basically the same. It's just skin color and maybe a religion that changes, but basically we're all the same.
Fascinating, because I did observe a similar thing happening on the Seychelles. We had the opportunity to visit the Seychelles, and I was never really able to put my finger on the insularity, on the insular nature of where, you know, everybody was in the same boat, and therefore let's make the best out of it. So that is fascinating. I have been fascinated with travel for a long time for very similar reasons to what has attracted you to travel. And of course, we're calling this episode Adventures on a Faraway Island. In the sense, over the years, it has been an adventure. I'm not sure whether I'm moving something here. Something is moving without me wanting to move it. But how would you picture this adventure? I mean, I usually think of adventure, okay, I'm going to do something new. In that sense, with your travels, is it always an enchantment type of thing when either you get on a plane? I hate getting on a plane anymore. And I have a feeling that you do too. In fact, I think you've written about it a little bit, that you don't care for the mechanical part of it.
She likes trains, I think, right? Yeah.
But yet, when I see the picture of you on a train in Asia, that is an adventure. It's something. It's an allure. How would you define adventure in this sense, Catherine?
I think in the same way maybe that you would define exotic. Exotic is relative. And I'll give you an example, is that when I got married, my husband and I wanted to go to an exotic destination for us. And so we went to the Czech Republic, because we live on a tropical island, so we didn't want a honeymoon with beaches and palm trees and whatever. We wanted something exotic to us, which was exactly what we found in the Czech Republic. So I think an adventure is that. An adventure is something that's exotic. It takes us out of our daily life. And I have made some trips that are adventurous. It's all relative. Some of the trips that I've made, for example, the Trans-Siberian train across Russia from Vladivostok, to some really adventurous travelers, well, that's nothing. They would do it hiking or hitchhiking. To other people, it's the height of adventure. So I think it's relative to our own experiences and to what we feel like doing, but it's something that takes us out of our daily lives and makes us feel that life is worth living.
Right.
That's
So
right.
well. Gerda, please, I don't want to steal the whole limelight here with a question, because I'm just dying to follow up on that. But go ahead, Gerda.
I do have a question for you, Catherine. What advice would you give to a young person going into a place like Reunion Island with new language and new culture, how to stay in contact with peers, and anything you can tell them?
Well, at the risk of sounding like an old fuddy-duddy, it's a lot easier today than it used to be. When I arrived on Reunion, it was 6 weeks to get a letter from my parents. I called them on the phone once a year. Today it is a lot easier, but it's still a place where you can't be homesick. You can't afford to be homesick when you're so far from family. And it's true, as we, any of us who are living far away from family, as we see family and friends get older, and we know that we're so far away from loved ones, that can be quite difficult. So that is something, it's something to bear in mind. As far as coming to somewhere like Reunion or another similar situation, another island is concerned, you have to bear in mind as well the insularity that I mentioned earlier on. And this insularity is physical. You need to take a long plane trip to get anywhere, and you can encounter a certain insularity in people's attitudes. For example, people are always very surprised to see somebody speaking any language that's not French or Creole. If I happen to speak English to somebody, that is very surprising. People are not used to hearing any other languages being spoken. So I'm lucky because I speak the local language, and because physically I can get away with being a local. I can blend in. I had a different experience, of course, of expatriation when I was in South Korea, where, of course, I stuck out like a sore thumb because I don't look like a local, and I didn't speak the language enough. Does that answer your question?
I have a very quick follow-up question on that, and it's actually related to the professional part of it. I read somewhere in your blog that you had, I think, last year a chance to attend a lecture, I think in some center of literary and historical research or something like that.
At the university, yes.
Yes, and my question is related to how do you keep updated then? You know, if those opportunities are few and far between, what do you do professionally to keep updated?
That is a very good, subject, actually. It's one of the reasons I mentioned earlier on in my talk about I started using social media in Korea, and I think that social media is a lifesaver. For somebody in my situation who's far away, who can't sort of nip out and have lunch with colleagues, I have to admit I'm rather envious of different meetings and get-togethers that happen. I would so much like to be a part of that. Training courses. I know, for example, the SFT, the Société Française des Traducteurs, Syndicat Français des Traducteurs. I think they have training courses that can be relayed by teletransmission, which is something which I've not done yet, but I'm hoping to do that in the near future.
So webinars and hopefully this type of medium, would be something that will work out. You'd be surprised, Catherine. I mean, we're surrounded by conferences and colleagues and everything, and the reason we started this particular initiative is greatly due to the fact that a lot of people, even though they're there in that medium, don't really communicate with each other as colleagues. So it's all relative, like you were saying earlier, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Maybe in some ways I feel I have to make more of an effort because I know I'm so far away.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. I'd like to shoehorn something into that very topic, because the mobility today continues regardless of what we think, how remote, how far a location might be. But let's say that a young person is watching today, Catherine, and they are considering going somewhere that is not close to home, where they're not familiar with the culture. There's an inherent fear. As humans, we have an inherent fear in going to that unknown, and I think you've touched on that. Part of that is being disconnected. I remember 1982 arriving in a location in the Middle East on a job where if I didn't find my parents on the other end of the telephone line, when I made a phone call, that first call, I would go to the bottom of the line, and the process would start all over again. It might be 2 or 3 days before I might be able to get a line to call again. But it's these things that may change. Today, if you were to put yourself in the shoes of that young person today, what advice would you give them? They're contemplating a trip to an unknown destination. Should they be fearful? Should they be reluctant to accept the position? How should they be looking at something like this today compared to 17, 20, or 30 years ago?
I think that a certain amount of fear is healthy. It's also normal. I think that often when we're younger, maybe we don't have quite so much fear as we do at an older age. Maybe at an older age, we're settled, maybe we've bought a house, maybe we have a family. It's difficult to uproot oneself. And so for a younger person, I think it comes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier. There are a lot of means of communications that didn't exist before. Internet has changed our lives in that respect. I think that's important to remember. It's not always the case in all island communities, but something to remember on an island like Reunion is the amount of unemployment. I think that Reunion currently is the region of Europe with the highest rate of unemployment. So it's not all. It's nice to live on a tropical island, but there are some downsides to that.
Right.
Side. I was going to ask you about that, about the market for translators in Reunion Island.
Well, like a lot of places, it's all down to word of mouth. I have a lot of contacts, both personal and from my former working life, and I think that is really important. And I think that it's the same for any translator. With any job that you do, that can be your next job, because you can get a recommendation from any job that you do. So that is important. Again, today, with the means of communications that we have, you can be a translator on somewhere like Reunion and not have any local clients, especially if you are already established and you come with your own clients and you're working at a distance. So from a translator point of view, I touched on interpreting earlier on. For interpreting, it's very, very occasional. So there is a little bit of court work, but even then it's very limited. A little bit of main sort of interpreting would be business interpreting, very, very rarely conference interpreting, and when it is conference interpreting, there's no installation, there's no booths or any of that sort of material.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick follow-up on that also, Catherine. As far as the market part of it, what are your specialties? I know that you have a business background, and that you said that you were in fact doing that job while you were starting the translation, and when the translation was not a full-time job yet. But both for translation and interpreting, is business your main specialty, or?
Yes, it is my main specialty. 14 years in the business world, so yes, it's definitely that. I worked at the same time as working in business. I was working in plastics I was working in business in a company that manufactured plastics.
Oh.
I also deal with plastics manufacturing. But, anything to do with business, whether it be management or marketing, is really where I feel most at home. But Sorry. As I was saying earlier on, again, you're on a small island. Sometimes somebody might ask me to translate something extremely literary or something extremely rather technical. When I've seen a document, and if I think it's within my if I think it's within my possibilities, I will take it on. People want to work with somebody that they know or somebody that's been recommended to them.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's so the bulk of your work related to business or translation work is business. How, again, from my own personal experience in the Middle East, even though Arabic was the local language, the official language was English. Officially, then you are translating documents for businesses from Creole to English, or primarily English to French, I meant.
Yes, from French, only from French into English.
Into English.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the challenge. Now, again, it's a different part of this whole thing.
Did we lose Al?
He's back, I think.
Oh, was I frozen there for a while?
Yes, for a little bit.
You froze for a little bit, yeah.
Okay. What was the last?
You started to speak about a challenge, Al.
Okay. Yes. Again, I'm sorry. Going back to the challenge of moving to Reunion and being able to learn or to be fully fluent, or as fluent as possible, in Creole, and specifically Reunion Creole. At what level of expertise would you say you are today in the Creole language, and do you feel comfortable in starting a conversation in Creole? Because that is a fascinating part that I never had to face that when I was in the Middle East.
I'm definitely a lot more at home in French because I learned French in school. I learned the grammar in school. I continued that in university. I speak French in my daily life at home, and it's the language that I mainly work in now as a translator. Creole, I have a proficient level, but not at the same level as French. I will not generally spontaneously start a conversation in Creole, but if I'm addressed in Creole, I would continue in Creole.
Mm.
Great. That is amazing. Mm-hmm.
One thing about Creole is about Reunion Creole is it doesn't actually have a set writing system. So one person who it's not written very often, but when it is written, it can be written in a completely different way by two different people. So that doesn't help things.
Right.
So there's no orthography rules, I guess I could say. Is that there's no?
Well,
oh wow.
Different people who are trying to impose different rules, different spelling rules, but it's not. I think that one day they'll get there, and that a set of rules will be decided on. But it's not the case today.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Also, should we go back to the topic that we're also anxious to find out about, all about Catharine's travels, particularly in Asia?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to get there, but I also was extremely interested in the professional part. I do have one more question about the professional aspect. Given the technology, we are communicating from almost halfway around the world, not quite. Do you have particular jobs where you collaborate with other translators using technology such as what we're using now, where you can share documents online, or is it more of a single side type of translation job, if you will?
I would say at the moment I work by myself. I'm not against working with other translators, but the occasion so far has never presented itself. But it's something that I'm completely open to, and with today's technology would be completely possible.
Right. Okay. Thank you, because that is always ever present. You know, to what extent do translators collaborate around the world? Are jobs big enough that may require collaboration with someone either in France or some other part of the world? And it definitely seems like the technology is giving us an opportunity to do so. So I'll keep that in mind and see what develops in the future. If we can go back to your travels, I'm fascinated by several aspects of your travels around the world. The fact that you visited 18 countries in 3 years is a huge, huge amount of traveling. The fact that you may have spent 6 weeks on one of your longest travels, I believe that's still your record. Is that correct?
It depends. I spent 3 months in the States a couple of years ago, but part of that was working, so I don't know whether it counts as one trip or not. But yeah.
Of course it does. Yes.
It's probably not as exotic to us. That's probably why we don't focus on
well,
that.
what I was getting at was, in part, that 6-week trip. Our vacations were typically 6 weeks, 42 days plus 2 days travel time each way. But one of the things that I found outstanding was your scuba diving off of Sumatra's northwest tip.
Yes.
Were you diving on wrecks, or what? If you can give me an idea of that, because I'm a scuba diver myself. In 1984 alone, I think 82, maybe 84 dives in the Red Sea. Some of those were wrecks. Looking at some fascinating structures. But what was it like there off of the Sumatra tip?
The diving is one of the best places I've ever dived. The island is called Pulauwe. It's part of Banda Aceh province, which most people know because that's where the epicenter of the 2004 tsunami was. And It's a place where they have Sharia law, and apparently Sharia law forbids dynamite fishing, because a lot of places in Asia have been desecrated by dynamite fishing. Mm-hmm. So the underwater life is incredibly rich. There was only one wreck that we dived on. I can't remember. I remember a couple of more, but we only dived on one wreck. We also dived on some hot water springs, which was quite an experience.
Wow.
But wreck-wise, I've dived on more wrecks in the Philippines, and then there are other places in the Pacific which I haven't been to where I know there are a lot of wrecks now.
Right. Fascinating. How easy was it to arrange those? I know that many companies, or several companies, depending on where you are, may offer the services, but did you rely more on some of the native companies or some of the internationally known companies? Because that can be easier or harder to arrange depending on whether you have local contacts, etc.
Well, do you mean in general or diving?
No, particularly in Sumatra.
Okay. Right from the start, I always made the choice to organize the trips myself. So I generally sort of dived into, excuse the pun, I dived into a guidebook and and the internet, and I'm certified with a well-known dive company whose name I won't mention, and they have a list of certified dive outlets. So when we were traveling somewhere, I would look and see if they had dive outlets at the place we wanted to go to, which was the case for this tiny island off the coast of Sumatra.
Fantastic.
Well, what is good with diving is that you get to go to places that you would never go to otherwise, and a little village like the place we were, diving was the whole village was living from diving, because there are restaurants to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at, and shops to buy supplies from. So there's transporters to take you to and from the ferry to get to and off to the island. So it's really, you know, making a whole community live, and also showing them that if they carry on preserving their underwater life, that people are willing to pay a lot of money to come and see that a pristine underwater environment.
Right, fantastic. Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, I wanted to ask actually about a different type of terrain, but it's something that to me would be a very exotic destination, even though it's landlocked. I wanted to find out a little bit about your trip to Mongolia.
Yeah, Mongolia is one of my favorite trips. I think living on an island like Reunion, which is quite small and quite mountainous, I don't get often to stand somewhere and look out for miles and miles and miles. And you get that in Mongolia, and you're looking out and there's no roads, there's no there's no street lights, there's I won't say there's nothing, because there is, because you have goats and you know, you have yaks, and you have maybe the occasional camel, but that was an amazing trip. We chose the I found out about an NGO, and we got to stay for 10 days with nomads, and that was an incredible experience.
Wow.
Sharing their daily life, and it's quite something. They in some respects, if Genghis Khan was to come back to Mongolia today, I would say about 90% of the lifestyle is he would recognize from
still the same. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Most yurts today have solar panels, so maybe they can watch a little bit of TV, but it's sort of limited to how much sun there is. And of course, so
it's you and nature, basically, right?
Exactly, yes. But it's a heck of a nature. It's amazing.
And beautiful.
Thank
you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine. Herda, if you'll go ahead. I kind of sensed that you may be getting ready to ask a question too.
Thanks, Al. I just wanted to ask you, Catherine, have you been in the United States at all?
Yes, I've been about 4 times. I have a brother who lives in the States, and the trip that I mentioned earlier on, so I worked for 6 weeks in Vermont, and then with 3 colleagues we bought a car for $500. We drove across to California from Vermont.
Oh, wow. That's a long drive.
We drove down from San Francisco to Los Angeles, back across to Florida, and back up to New York State, and we sold it for the same price that we bought it.
Wow.
That's the best $500 car that I know of.
No kidding. I'm about 2.5 hours south of San Francisco, so you almost made it to the Monterey Peninsula. It's a nice area. You'll have to come back, definitely. You'll have a home here whenever you decide to come back.
For the readers of your blog, Catherine, you know, it's funny how we find things as we travel around the world. But for the readers of your blog, and I won't specifically mention the item, but I will suggest to readers of your travel blog that they look up Q for the quirkiest attraction.
Oh, I think he froze again, but he was starting to talk about your ABCs of travel, which we also found quite interesting. Yeah, you froze for a little bit, Al. Sorry, I was finishing up on the question.
Yeah, sorry about that. But right, it's my whole point is that as we travel around the world, we are to find things that are fascinating, things that are day to day, no matter where we are, and things that stick in our minds for the rest of our lives. I really would like to know on a more human level, Catharine, you've been on Reunion Island a total of 17 years now, almost 18, correct?
Correct.
3 years in Korea. Do you think, and if it has, how has living on Reunion changed you as a person, you as a professional translator?
That's quite a difficult question to answer. Thank you for asking it. I think my answer is not necessarily specific to Reunion. I think my answer is that of anybody who has left their home country and has gone to live somewhere else. I think a lot of us share that. It broadens our minds and it makes us a lot more tolerant to what we can see to what we can see around us and to those that we see around us.
And I think that the traveling and the languages probably go hand in hand, right? Is that, I mean, that's what we all find so fascinating about different cultures and different ways of life and all that, is that?
And yeah, I think there's a saying, isn't there, about, you know, if you want to understand a culture, learn its language. That's what frustrated me a little bit about my language endeavors in Korea, is that I never got to be fluent enough, and I think that in some respects I must have missed out on a lot of the culture. But yes, I think language and culture just really goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Al, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted a follow-up that you were going to do on that.
It was the way you put your answer. I suspect that you're really talking more of an expatriate, somebody living in a culture, in a country, in a location that is not their original location, as opposed to somebody just traveling. Am I correct?
Exactly,
right.
Yes.
Right. Which, yeah, because it definitely has changed me forever, having lived overseas for 22 years. The exposure to different around the world, seeing all the different scenes, getting to know the different people, the different foods, etc. I must ask you, what is your favorite food on Reunion? Your favorite dish, if you will.
Mm-hmm. On Reunion, the typical dish is a dish called a curry, which is a very distant relative of the Indian curry, and it's onion, turmeric, garlic, and some other spices, which are mixed together with a basic ingredient, which can be fish or chicken or a lot of different things. There is one that is made with jackfruit and smoked meat, and that's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's almost 11:30 over here, so lunchtime.
You were frozen for just a few seconds when you started to describe the dish. What is the name of the dish?
It's called curry, C-A-R-R-I, and it's the typical local dish. And it's always served with a pile of rice and some lentils.
Right. And the jackfruit, I believe, is a part of it. I think I may have missed that part of it. Okay.
Yeah, it's not always part of it, but the one of my favorite dishes is made of jackfruit. Yeah.
Right. I think that dish sounds a little bit like a dish on the Seychelles.
Possibly, yes.
It might be.
In the Seychelles, they eat fruit bats, but there's no, we don't do that here.
Okay. Okay.
I think that Al, we're probably coming up to an hour, and I don't know if you want to sort of wrap up things with a questionnaire that you have prepared, so we don't go too much over the hour.
Thank you very much, Esther. And yes, Catherine, I would like to ask you the 10 questions that James Lipton always asked of his guests in the program in the U.S., the Actors Studio. And those are the 10 questions that he extracted from the Proust questionnaire. And it's supposed to show some of the soul, some of the person. If I could ask you the 10 questions now, because the answers to me are always fascinating. What is your favorite word?
I think that would have to be serendipity. I like the sound of it, and I like the meaning of it.
Great. What is your least favorite word?
Probably traditional. I like tradition, I like history, but I think that traditional is overused.
Okay. What turns you on?
I love being outside under a night sky with the stars, with or without the moon. I just love it. I'm never happier than when there's I can walk out of my house and into the garden and see the stars on any night, but I'm never happier than when there's a power cut and there's no artificial light at all. And I'm so happy.
Right. What turns you off?
Stupidity.
We have some in common. Very much in common. What sound or noise do you love?
Probably no noise, as in silence.
The quiet night under the stars, right? On the other side of that coin, what sound or noise do you hate?
I think I'm like a lot of people on that one. I hate the sound of nails across a blackboard.
Right. Right. What is your favorite cuss word? You can use Creole if you'd like.
I think I do like. That would be longuette ta maman. I won't explain. It's very rude, but it's a swear word. It's a swear term.
Okay. Okay, we won't ask for details on that. This one is interesting for a translator. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, maybe my answer is a little bit predictable on this one, but I think I'd like to do something in the travel industry. For example, a hotel tester.
Okay. You mean, by that you mean literally where you are sent or you go and you stay at different hotels? Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, me too. Reviews on hotels.
Secret shopper for hotels.
Yes.
What profession would you not like to do?
Probably tabloid journalist.
Okay. And the last one, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'd like him to say that welcome, because you have family and friends who are waiting for you.
Great.
Lovely.
Great.
Beautiful,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful, Catherine. I did not mention it earlier. This new Hangout style shows the number of viewers that are on the stream. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure whether it means on the Google Plus stream or the YouTube stream, which is either way, the stream is all over the world. To our viewers, around the world, wherever you might be, you have been watching our interview, and we have been listening to Catharine Cellier-Smart on Reunion Island, deep in the Indian Ocean, east of Madagascar, east of Africa, for those of you not familiar with the geography of that part of the world. Catharine, it has been delightful to have you on today on Interpreters and Translators on Air. It's a fascinating story, and I thank you. We thank you for sharing your story with us. Esther, if you'd like to say a few words before we say goodbye to our viewers and to Catharine, go ahead.
Yes, definitely a beautiful journey. Catharine, thank you for sharing. And it's obviously a life full of adventure for you, and I suspect there are hundreds of adventures to come in the future. We really appreciate you being here with us. Anytime you want to come to the U.S., you're very welcome. And I think that our viewers are going to find your story quite compelling, not only from the point of view of where you are at, but also your journey into the profession that we all love, which is translation or interpreting. So thank you very much for sharing again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you very much for having given me this chance to share my journey and my story with you. Thank you.
Great. And Gerda, please go ahead.
Thank you, Al. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Catharine, you're always welcome to hang out with us.
Very good point. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Catharine, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you very much for letting me share my story with you today.
Well, it's been delightful. It has been terrific. I've learned a lot from meeting you, from knowing what you have been up to for the last 18 years. Actually, probably a little bit longer than that. Thank you, Catharine. And what we would like to do is invite you to a follow-up hangout. We'll cancel or stop this broadcast here in the next few seconds. And unless anybody has any more questions or comments, or you, Catharine, especially, I will go ahead and end this in the next 2 seconds.
Thank you, Al.
Bye,
so
everybody.
we'll exit and then we'll come back, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Catharine.
Bye-bye.
See you in a minute. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.